Hey everyone, Margarita here. I just want to continue on a little bit further in depth of the labor and delivery that I had while giving birth while suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. I did the video filming in front of the hospital, giving a little bit more additional information. Plus, I believe it was episode 1 or 2 where I talked about giving birth while suffering from it in the initial beginning part of the series, in episodes 1 and 2 of my severe carbon monoxide poisoning untreated. So those two episodes give the base information, and then the episode before this is where I'd filmed in front of the hospital, and now I'm going to go a little more in depth with the blood work that I did not order for about 2.5 years after I had given birth. So upon putting my poisoning together backwards, once I was overloaded from Little Daddy's restaurant in Taylor, Michigan, then I worked backwards in time to piece together when each symptom technically began and when I really truly started not feeling good, because by the time I woke up overloaded, then I had known for a while something was wrong. I just didn't know what was wrong, and I couldn't quite pinpoint it, and I was never normal again after having the baby. And then after I returned to the place, my functioning was even less than initially after I had the baby and went back to being self-employed. And then 7 months later, I returned to this restaurant, and I started losing more functioning. So, and then I overloaded 14 months of weekends later. So, putting this together backwards is what had to happen. And that's generally how some carbon monoxide poisoning situations are figured out. A lot of times they can be figured out backwards because they're so confusing. There's so many different symptoms, such a wide variety of symptoms, and there's so many at one time. The person being poisoned, or if it's a family or numerous people, they're all fairly confused and their brains aren't starting to work right overall over time, if this is a long-term thing. So there's issues here when it comes to piecing something like that together when you're having repeated exposures or it's chronic. Now, I know that I'm not the only one who's pieced it together backwards. I would say there's at least 20% of cases where they're pieced together backwards, maybe more than that. Now, when I got to the hospital that day, I had intended on going in for a water birth. That's why that hospital was chosen. It was Hutzel Women's Hospital in Detroit, and that was the only hospital anywhere nearby. I think there was one in Ohio. We probably should have went to the one in Ohio, but that offered the tub, the hookup, and the midwife to deliver the baby, and not a doctor. So that's what was supposed to happen. I believe the 2 midwives I was seeing were out of Wayne State's physicians group, was the group they were with. And then when I arrived to have the baby, neither one of my midwives were on call, and they used a different midwife from the Wayne State physicians group. So this person I had never met before, her name was Angela Foster. So I found that in the records. I do not remember this, but she was the one filing her nails while my baby was being born. When I first arrived, I didn't see Angela for a couple hours into this. I initially saw a nurse practitioner while I was in triage, and while they were trying to do things against my will and trying to tell me I'm going to do certain things, and I'm telling them that's not what's happening. That went on for a couple of hours before I ever made it to a room, and by the time I got to the room, I could no longer advocate for myself or walk because I was so swollen, so loaded up with the water I was drinking. It wasn't processing due to the carbon monoxide poisoning, and it was everywhere in every spot of my body. Now, going over this stack of these were the labor and delivery records. I don't even think these are all of them. They're a little repetitive, so I separated them at one point. And going over them, I do notice that it says that there was no edema, which means no swelling. I was completely swollen to the max. My body, everywhere in my body was completely swollen up. Each spot could not have gotten any more swollen. I felt like I was going to explode. I'd never experienced anything like that ever in my life. Literally every finger, every toe, every inch of my body, my entire head, my whole body, my tongue, everything was swollen so bad. It hurt. That's why I could barely walk. And then I couldn't sit because the baby was like starting to come out. So that wasn't possible either. And that's how I got in a predicament where I couldn't stand. I couldn't even hold the weight on me. And then I wasn't comfortable. I couldn't sit. I'm asking for the tub of water to be comfortable. And the place acted like they were going to give it to me, and then played all these games for a couple hours till I became incapacitated, and then took me into a room where they had no intention of ever giving me the water, for all these different reasons. Each person had a different excuse, and they thought they were going to do all these other things to me, which I totally declined on. And they just basically kept me uncomfortable the entire time. No one had any intention of trying to help me. Nobody had any intention of trying to help me get comfortable. It took over an hour to get a yoga ball and several requests, and that's the only thing I'd been sitting on at home to stay comfortable. So now I either need a tub of water or a yoga ball, and it's to the point where I actually just need the tub of water. The baby's too far down. The yoga ball's not even that great at this point. I ended up on the floor on my hands and knees, so swollen, and I was in so much pain from being so swollen, I could not move. All I could do was cry and scream. I was in so much pain because then I was also short on hemoglobin, which means you're short on oxygen. You and the baby are short on oxygen. I came in at 8:30 a.m. This is about 11 hours after leaving the place with the restaurant with the carbon monoxide. So I was in a high level of carbon monoxide and had repeated exposures almost 10 weeks prior to this, and arrived with a 7.2 hemoglobin. So that my blood pressure was 151/80, and my heart rate was 113 beats per minute when I arrived at 8:30 a.m. At 9 a.m., a half hour later, oh my goodness, I wonder how that happened. That's crazy, because that's never happened before, and it's in a place where it should not be falling. There's no reason I should have fell. A half hour later, my blood pressure was 145/78, and my heart rate was 107 beats per minute. And then an hour and a half from there, my blood pressure was 126/82. So yeah, like I said, some of these pages are separated. So I do have that information showing what I have just off shortly after arriving. You can see something was more terribly wrong in the beginning, and the longer you're away from the carbon monoxide, slowly your symptoms start to dissipate, even if you are repeatedly being exposed or you're having ongoing symptoms. That's kind of how it goes. So right there's a big red flag that those are really high. The first two are very high. And then I had high blood sugar, and it was like something excessively high. Like all these things were just way out of whack. And it was because of the carbon monoxide. That's what it was causing, because I had so many exposures to it, and it was slowly causing my body to not process any oxygen. And that's why I was swollen so heavily. So, like they've lied here in some of these records. And beyond that, I can't find any of they didn't put them in my file when I ordered these records. Either that or they got rid of them altogether. But the later blood pressure, heart rate, the later times and dates with that stuff on it, mind you, I was only there 24 hours. It was not in the file, where they removed it completely because things were going wrong. And there is some other mistakes within these records, things that were put in there that either did or did not happen. They said it did and it didn't, or it didn't, they said it did. There's numerous things that are wrong within the blood work. There's things they're notating, acting like I'm this healthy individual, which in a sense was true. I was healthy before I started getting poisoned by carbon monoxide, but in that moment I was suffering so severely. I was already getting to the point where I couldn't talk, and they wanted to argue with me, and they were pissing me off, and I'm getting more and more irritated. And I knew there was something terribly wrong because of how swollen I was. And with the hemoglobin of 7.2, now you would be given that mom oxygen. If you've seen this blood work with all these highs and lows and all these things on here, that's something you would do. Even if you don't know that it's carbon monoxide poisoning, you would still do that. So that's very odd that they didn't do that. I found that as a pretty big red flag. And by the time this had all occurred to me, I was way past the point of no return. Brain damage had already occurred twice. Like, I was never going to come back from that. I walked in the hospital and had a baby in one day and came out and was never the same. And then it got worse from there, and I had an additional injury due to that. And then I was past the point of no return forever. So that's what happened to me. Not all labors and deliveries go the way you think, especially if you go into this unprepared properly. I was not thinking to that degree of things. All I knew is that I had a deranged mother in the background who I needed to make sure she did not know where I was at. So I intentionally made sure no one knew exactly where we were except for my one friend. And no one knew. And I did that for that reason. And now looking back on it, that was a really big mistake. And when they saw me arrive, and we technically weren't married or anything on paper, I had to give birth on Medicaid. I was not on my ex's insurance yet, because we are still on his insurance to this day. The way it was all set up, and we were considered a legal family and whatnot, and there's all these other kids. Like, we have a total of 5 kids on there. 4 of them are adults, and so we're all still on his insurance, because he has a really good insurance plan with where he works. So it doesn't cost any extra to have me and my son that's not his on there. All the kids have all been on it, and it was really hard to get each person on. It took about a couple years to get each person on, and it was a process because there were so many of us. Each person had its own problem. So in this moment when I was giving birth, I had been trying to get myself on his insurance prior to having the baby, knowing it was going to make a difference to certain hospitals, certain people, and what they're looking for, that plays a role. So I really did not want to have to give birth on Medicaid, which did end up having to happen. The paperwork and everything we were doing did not move fast enough. So that made me their target as well. But immediately upon being born, the baby goes on his insurance no matter what. And now I kept trying to tell the hospital this numerous times, and they repeatedly refused to take his actual insurance and put him on there. They ended up successfully putting him on Medicaid, which caused more problems, and they wanted us to be on Medicaid for their agenda and what they had planned carrying out. Now, we had already had him on the insurance the next day after he was born. It wasn't even in 24 hours. We had him on there. He was already on there, and then the hospital tried to ignore that, put the Medicaid in front of that, which later down the line caused additional problems for other people in our family that had procedures done. It made those procedures cost twice as much due to how they did that, because that birth should have counted, those bills and what came out of it should have went toward the family deductible and out of pocket. And that changed what medical bills we had to pay later down the line out of our own pocket, because they refused to put the baby on his actual insurance. And then they refused to drop it for a whole year. They refused to take him off the insurance when he should have never been put on Medicaid. So there's 2 clues right there. And then shortly after, I was put on my ex's insurance. So it was just a matter of getting through all the red tape and all the paperwork involved and everything we all had to go through to get on there. They made it a process for sure. So, I did end up having to do it that way. That caused them to target us even more. There's several things they did here that were wrong. Now, the 2 midwives that I had, one I didn't see, but the next day after, she came in early in the morning after the baby was born. So she did not see everything that had gone on. She only saw the after effects. And what she would have seen from her end at that point, she wouldn't have realized, I don't think, to the degree what was actually going on and what I had experienced. And that, because I do believe this involves like only certain individuals. I don't believe this involves every person at every hospital. It's like some sort of secret society on the down low. They're in on this. Each person gets a portion. It's certain people that are involved at certain levels, I believe, when it comes to human trafficking in hospitals. So I am going to post the link to down below in the description box of the case that I had read. It was aired like a couple weeks ago, and it was at the same time frame that this happened to me. It was about a 1.5 year time frame. These 3 people disappeared from the same hospital system. And all of those hospitals in Detroit and restaurants and everything, there's underground tunnels that run all through Detroit, and I'm pretty sure they go all the way to Canada. I've personally been down there myself, working in the restaurants from numerous angles of it. And I probably should have never been wandering around on there, but I did at one point, because I worked at this restaurant that was, I was bored, and I ended up going down there and wandering around. But probably not the safest idea. I did that when I was in my 20s. I was really healthy, so I had no problem running. But I do know they exist. They did all of these run all down under Detroit. So you'll see, if you want to watch the other story and then watch what I'm talking about in my situation, this is exactly what happened. That way, when I arrived there, they saw I was their target. They saw something was wrong. They knew based on the blood work and the numbers and the everything they had. My platelets were at like 132,000. They're supposed to be somewhere between 150 or 450,000. There was definitely something going on. There was all these obscure things just off. Especially with that low of a hemoglobin. That's directly a lack of oxygen right then and there, especially when you're carrying another human and you're trying to give birth to it. So there would be no reason to not give oxygen. I declined quite a few things while I was there. They don't have the baby's heart rate or anything on here because they kept trying to put an internal monitor in me, and I kept telling them no. Like, why would there be an internal monitor when I'm supposed to be in a tub of water? That doesn't add up. So they knew they weren't getting away with all their bullshit. I was extremely swollen. Right on here, they've doctored up. It's funny, but no, they doctored up a lot of these medical records, changed things around, just made it look like I was very healthy, just a little low on blood, and maybe a few other extra issues. The high blood sugar, that was directly from the carbon monoxide. I'd never had that before in my life. It was part of the ongoing issues that started happening once I started working at the restaurant and slowly being exposed. So several of these things all kind of this all started at the same time, weeks earlier, and it was very extreme when I arrived for labor and delivery. So all of these things happened. I don't have any of the measurements of anything after giving birth other than my hemoglobin was 6.2 upon leaving. And they weren't trying to give us oxygen. They weren't trying to treat us in any way, shape, or form. They were just sitting there waiting for things to get worse. And I knew things were about to get worse, and I knew I didn't feel good. But it was such an extreme difference from being in such extreme distress to not being in extreme distress like that, that it's not noticeable that you had a brain injury or what had happened. It's not really noticeable. So it wasn't for like weeks went by and I'm just kind of dazed around, like never returning to normal, not really knowing why. But it was because I lost the ability to communicate. I was just screaming at the top of my lungs at that point, in extreme pain everywhere, from lack of oxygen to all the joints, joints, muscles, and basically everywhere. I had pain everywhere, extreme pain everywhere. My head was hurting so bad that I couldn't even talk, plus I was having a brain injury. I couldn't say anything. I could spit out a few words here or there. I know at one point, right before the baby was born, the midwife did give me one breath of oxygen, and I took the world's deepest breath because I knew that as soon as I did that, I knew that that's what I needed. That's what the problem was. And then she gave me one other breath, and I was screaming for more, and she kept saying no. She kept standing up saying no, that's enough. I'm in extreme distress, mind you. Having a brain injury. This has gone on for hours at this point. So this went on. He was born at 3:40 p.m. In that manner that it was that extreme, it was around 11:30 a.m. when that started, to that degree. So from 11:30, so my carbon monoxide symptoms looks like they started to go away a little bit the longer I was there. And then once the labor got to like where it was getting extreme, for those 4 hours, it was very extreme. It shouldn't have went on that long. If I was in a tub of water, the baby would have been born probably in an hour and a half to 2 hours from that point at the max. That never needed to happen. I did have, the brain injury, and then as soon as that happened and then the baby came out and the pressure was relieved in what was causing the extreme distress, I knew that was my last breath. I knew if I didn't have the baby in that moment, that was going to be it. I was going to die. I didn't know if the baby was going to die, but I knew I wasn't going to make it. But when the baby came out, all of that pressure where I couldn't communicate and my brain was pressed so hard and everything was just so messed up that I couldn't speak. And as soon as the baby came out and it was such a great relief, I started to, I could say something, but I couldn't even say what I was trying to say, or I was trying to say something's wrong. I was trying to say several things. They were asking me things, but I didn't really know what I was saying. But it was such an extreme relief that's what threw everything off, because now here's a serious problems going on and no one's recognizing it. And then part of this is, right before the baby was born, I started screaming to God for help, because that's all I had. That's all I had left. But I knew this is it. I'm not going to make it. They wouldn't give me a C-section. No oxygen, no C-section, no pain relief, no water, no nothing. Let's just keep her completely uncomfortable till she dies, is basically what it felt like they were all thinking. And then that room full of, after they're calling all these codes, there's a room full of 10, 15 other people standing in the corner just waiting for me to die. No one's trying to do anything. No one's trying to do anything to help me. My ex is running back and forth between smoking cigarettes, coming in, standing in the corner. No one's doing anything. But when I started screaming to God, the nurse that I consider an angel came running from I don't know where. It was like she could read the energy of the room. She came in immediately knowing a certain part of my back was jammed and it needed to be pressed on, and the baby was stuck. And as soon as she did that, she knew that was the answer, and she transferred me her energy, and that's how the baby was born. She knew immediately. She threw half of those people out that were standing in the room, started kicking people out. These people were of no help whatsoever. I don't know how she knew. she knew certain things, and she knew something was wrong because I couldn't hear, and she was like talking really loud, and it's like she knew I couldn't hear and I wasn't coherent and I was losing consciousness, and I kept trying to say I don't feel good. I don't know what I was trying to say. I kept trying to say I was going to lose consciousness, and then no one like could hear me because I couldn't really talk very loud. But like she knew certain things, and then she did those certain things and then forced the baby on me when I was like, no way, like I'm trying to say, wait, don't, like I can't hold him. I think I'm like, I was ready to die in that moment. I thought I was going to die, thought I was going to lose consciousness at least. And then she like, hurry up, handed the baby off to me in that manner and left the room. They all rushed out of there. It was just my ex and I standing in the room. And then all I could say was, stand closer, don't move, because I think I might drop the baby, is what I said. And so, because I didn't want the baby hitting the floor, he was standing close enough to where the baby wouldn't hit the floor. And I don't know if that was some type of last-ditch effort for like us to save each other type thing, like skin-to-skin contact. I don't really know. But the way the records looked and what was actually going on and what I saw occur, you wouldn't be giving someone in my predicament no oxygen. From the time I arrived, you would have been giving me oxygen, and then all during labor and delivery, and it would have reversed the carbon monoxide poisoning. The hemoglobin probably would have went up pretty rapidly, and that wouldn't have went on as long as it did, whether I had the tub of water or not. So the fact that that all occurred, those are all very big red flags. They saw several things that they knew. We were their target. And, if I had actually died, I do believe they would have gotten away with at least taking my baby. They would have found some way to convince my ex that he couldn't take him home because we're not married and this and that and this and that. And he probably would have believed them, not really knowing his rights, and no one would have ever seen the baby. So I do believe they were at least going for that. A whole human body on the black market worth of organs is worth at least $1 million, especially someone the ages of the 20s or 30s. I was 32 years old when this happened, and plus a newborn baby. And I was very healthy. I worked out all the time prior to stepping foot inside that restaurant. So for many years, I worked out about 6 days a week. Now, the way they didn't give me the oxygen at any point during any of this, and then the games they were playing the second day, they were playing speakerphone games on the thing, trying to say you need to bring the baby here for this and that, and then take it with you to this room over here, and then they stop you in the middle and tell you you can't take the baby, and then they try to take your baby. There was all these things going on because we had no intention of letting the baby leave either one of our site while we were in there. Something seemed very off. I know he recognized something wasn't right, but I don't think he understood things to the degree what I was thinking, and we weren't talking about it out loud either. I was just in my mind so deep in thought about what had happened, like, okay, something's wrong, something's terribly wrong, we got to get out of here. I was in fight or flight mode, and I knew, like, we have to get out of here. Thank God I brought my own pills to the hospital. That's how I took care of the pain, held it together, got us out of there. In the meantime, I'm planning an escape route because there's an ankle monitor on the baby and a guard standing next to the door. Then they did try to involve CPS, and they tried to say all these different reasons. The only thing he found in my system is marijuana. Like, you don't have anything to go on. You're leaving against medical advice. Okay, well, you weren't doing anything while I'm here either. So what difference does it make if I die at home or if I die here? Like, either way, I'm not going to live. You weren't helping me in the first place. I wouldn't be in this predicament. So, there was all these red flags that happened with the labor and delivery, with what happened at that hospital. And then randomly, I got a survey a few days later on the phone about my hospital visit, asking me all these strange questions. And now that I've been through what I've been through, and we got left untreated so many times at so many different hospitals, this has actually happened to me at every hospital where something strange happened. They left us without treatment, knowing we were in physical distress, and kicked us out of the hospital. And this has happened numerous times. So each time one of those has happened, I've gotten this random magic survey after each one of those visits, and I don't answer any of them. But yes, I did manage to get the ankle monitor off the baby and get them to let us leave. I think they knew it wasn't going to go their way, but if they had gotten away with, that's why they were only giving me 3 breaths of oxygen. I was very close to dying. They knew it, I knew it. My body parts would have been worth over $1 million. They saw I didn't have like a female backup system. There was nobody else there with me. They probably configured nobody was coming looking for me. And if that all had happened in that manner, like, even though my mother worked in the hospital system, it was a different hospital system. But even if she had gotten wind of that, especially with who she is, she would have never came looking for me. She would have tried to take custody of my older 2 kids and play her Munchausen by proxy, and, oh, see, we raised them, we have to raise them because she makes bad decisions, and see, we have custody of them. And that's what she would have did. So like with the hospital and how they operate and not seeing the other family members there and being supportive, that's what my mother would have did. Nobody would have came looking for me, and I would have disappeared, and that would have been that. No one would have been able to find the baby, I'm sure, at that point, because like no one even seen the baby. No one else knew what the baby looked like. So I have a feeling that's what they were going for. However, I was too smart for them. I magically got saved by an angel at the very last second, knowing that was my last breath. So, they did try to run off with my baby numerous times. I about jumped up and beat somebody up. It was like 5:30 in the morning. I almost jumped out of bed and beat this bitch's ass. And after everything I'd already went through. And I've never seen somebody's hands move so quick. She dropped that baby cart so fast and ran out the room. Numerous people tried to do that to me. But I just knew for some reason, like, don't let this baby out of your sight. Do not leave. Like, if I go out here to do this, like, if I'm going to go scope this place out and look at this, go to this restaurant, scope the place out, like, do not leave. Do not take the baby to the nurse's station. Don't leave the baby. Stay right here in the room. We had the baby with us the entire time. Except for the one time they did scam us, called me to a class around the corner. They did manage to scam one time, and I think they only had the baby in their possession for 15 minutes, but they were planning something or they did something, because I caught them touching and rewrapping my baby in the end while trying to look something up. They were doing something, and I can't figure out what exactly it was, but at no time should he have ever been touched. So I never figured it out, but they had bigger plans. It just didn't go their way. If that angel nurse did not come at the last second and transfer me her energy, I would have been their next victim. They would have sold all my organs on the black market. No one would have ever came looking for me, and no one probably ever would have saw my baby ever again. With how they were, I saw exactly what they were thinking and what they were planning, and based on these numbers and what was going on there, and that's why a lot of the medical records they're just omitted. They're like not in there where they should be. Certain readings and things should be in there. They're not in there at all. And they did that intentionally to hide what they were doing. So there's numerous issues with that. I do believe that's what was going on there that day with me and my son. And I do believe that that's what happened with the 3 cases of the story that was released not that long ago. I'm going to put the link in the description box below. And I'm going to share this set of videos with that guy, the guy who runs the channel, and let them, post that, share that, and I'll put it down below in this video as well. And this will probably be, I think I might put the 2 initial videos of my carbon monoxide poisoning along with these 2 videos that I just did on the hospital and what happened there. So I might put them all together and send them to him, just those 4, and then the link to my channel with all the rest of the information, the other situations going on in our lives, and the ongoing issues we suffered from. This was one of the main problems, because this could have been corrected upon arrival at the hospital. With the carbon monoxide poisoning, not even knowing what that was. If we had just been given oxygen, it would have changed the outcome of what happened to us going forward, going home, me not ever being able to get back to work properly, me returning to the source. None of that ever had to occur had we been given oxygen during labor and delivery and upon arrival at the hospital. So that played a really big role in why the rest of everything else had occurred, because that could have been stopped right then and there. And I know that has nothing to do with my mother, because I made sure she had no idea where I was going intentionally. So that was its own situation. I just happened to pick the wrong hospital system. That is what happened, I do believe, and it fits right in with these other people's stories, age ranges and whatnot, and what they're looking for in a situation like that. They easily would have been able to make us disappear. No one would have ever seen us again. So be careful when you go. I wouldn't go to the hospital at all to have a baby, but I would go to a birthing center or try a home birth. But certain people do have to go to the hospital. So don't trust anybody. Make sure you've got numerous people there with you. Don't ever go in with just one or two people, like just, not just with one other person or by yourself. You need to have at least 2 or 3 people or more with you, because it is that serious. That's how serious the human trafficking, the organ trafficking is going on in this country and in this world. And who knows what they were going to do with the baby. They could have broke the baby's organs down and sold that for over $1 million each as well, or they could have sold him as a whole. Who knows? But that would have been $2 million plus right then and there. I do believe that's what was going on in my situation. So spread the news, share the story, like, comment, no, don't comment, like, I'm going to leave the comments off. Like, subscribe, share. I'll be back with another one. Thanks.